Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland, and in this video I'm going to be explaining what's wrong with policing in the United Kingdom. And I've dipped into a few books, well, read them to cover, one of them thrice, A Brief History of Crime by Peter Hitchens, the traditionalist political polemicist, Wasting Police Time by P.C. David Copperfield. That's a pseudonym. He's later come out with his real name. Lethal Force by Tony Long. Anyway, and these are some of my own reflections. I'm not a police officer. I never have been. I don't wish to be. So I'm not castigating the police as a whole. There are, of course, plenty public-spirited, fantastic, hard-working police officers who are doing their utmost to serve the public, and they often do a good job. There is a malaise within the police force, and that's a thing. They tend to call it the police service. I suppose perhaps it's a shift of mindset, not an entirely negative one. And often the problems of policing in the United Kingdom are not caused by the police. Often it's government, it's judicial rulings and so forth. One can walk hours across a British city and not see a single police officer or a single police car. And for a few miles, not a police station either. And I remember living in the countryside. I often went over a week without seeing a police officer. So it's almost as though there's been de-policing. I know in some areas of the United States, the past 30 years or so, where the police were excoriated by certain sections of the community, the police said, all right, we'll try de-policing. You think we're so terrible? You can do without us. And they would informally go on a localized strike, just not go down to certain streets and see if you like it better. And only the career criminals found that to be better. However much people lambasted the police, the majority of them recognized that it really was worth having them around. It seems in the United Kingdom that shoplifting has been virtually decriminalized. And I've spoken to shopkeepers about this, because the police say if the item stolen is less than £100, don't even bother reporting it. Don't just call us, there's no way we're going to come. Don't even bother telling us afterwards. We are not chasing somebody up over chump change, right? We have better things to do because they run off their feet. And so it's very difficult for people who are running small businesses or even supermarkets, because what can they do? And the police have often sent them letters saying, and if you detain them, hoping the police will arrive, make sure you don't breach their human rights, which is really to even cause them a bruise by holding on to them. And even detaining them, that could come into being false imprisonment. Yes, there is such a thing as a citizen's arrest. Police officers have confirmed this to be in person, but that could easily blur into false imprisonment, assault. So, law-abiding citizens would be just as vulnerable to prosecution as a thief. So people have to provide their own security guards and so forth. And petty thieves know they can do this with impunity, so long as they keep their thefts of sufficiently small items, of low economic value, they can get away with it. And then the courts are a problem as well, giving slap on the wrists if that, or the police might offer them a caution. The court might allow them to go scot-free so long as they give assurances they won't do it again. And these people with extensive criminal records sometimes get off with that. There could be community service and they don't even turn up, or they turn up late and do almost no work, or fines which are never paid back at 50 pence a week. None of that's the police's fault, usually. That's the judiciary, and that's politicians who do that. Paperwork. Well, so where are the police? There is this fallacy around that the United Kingdom doesn't have a sufficient number of police officers. In proportion to per capita population, the UK had about its highest number of police officers about 10 years ago. It has been cut by at least 20,000 in the last few years. And again, it's still fairly high by historic standards in relation to the number of people in the country. But it's paperwork keeps them off the streets. Why are they not out patrolling? Because they're in the police station and they have stacks and stacks of paperwork. The police are very reluctant to arrest because it's going to take 3 hours to process. They have so many forms to fill out. Sometimes the forms are amalgamated to a single one, but they're still collecting huge amounts of data, and it's a problem throughout government, all branches of the public service, just this addiction to compiling tons of data, much of which is no use to anybody, and in fact is counterproductive. It takes them away from the main task. You'll see the same in teaching. I hear the same from doctors and nurses. It's mostly about covering your ass, providing a paper trail, so that if there were ever a complaint against you, you would have the document which would be the complete answer and bar to prove due diligence, show you took all reasonable steps, and all this kind of drivel. So it's these things are done for bureaucratic reasons, for legalistic reasons. They're not really about protecting the public or enforcing the law. And sometimes the law is an arse, and we have excessive legislation, legislative hyperactivity, which hampers the ability of the police to do what they're there for. People seem to forget the police are there to prevent crimes being committed in the first instance, and second of all, to catch those who commit crimes if they are committed. So the police are not under strength, as I pointed out. Human rights. Now, the concept is laudable. I would rather people didn't come to harm, especially, well, not at the hands of others, that malice wasn't allowed to succeed. I think everybody would agree with that. So that's fine. Now the police sometimes need to use force, as Sir Robert Peel wrote when he invented the police as we know it, that they were to use minimum force. However, minimum force can occasionally, very occasionally, include killing someone. If that's the minimum they need to do to protect the public, they need to be allowed to do that without fear of prosecution. Now, I don't want a situation where the police are killing people willy-nilly. You see that in other countries, Brazil, the United States, and so on. So the police should only kill a person if they have a reasonable belief that they need to do this because that person is about to kill another or cause serious injury to another. It could turn out that belief is mistaken, but so long as it was honestly and reasonably held at the time, that police officer is entirely innocent. The police are human and they will make mistakes. To err is human, right? But what's the opposite outcome? Supposing they were too trigger unhappy, then they wouldn't fire when they should and more people would get killed. So whatever happens, innocent people are going to die. Of course we want to minimize it, but it can't be zero. But this also applies to lesser use of force, using the baton and so on. Now, I realised long ago the police used excessive force. And I'm aware, well, certainly anecdotally, until the 70s, the police, if they caught someone who was a known criminal, who had an extensive criminal record, yes, they would kick him and punch him to extract a confession. If they believed that he was guilty, they say, we'll just manufacture the evidence to prove that. Now, I'm not saying that all or even most police officers did it, but it's not a tiny number. And I've known of a police officer who's got on record to say, yeah, I saw this happen. He's now a law lecturer in Liverpool, talking about this sort of thing happening. So there are cases like Mark Duggan, where the police shot him dead. They had intelligence he was about to kill somebody else. Turns out he didn't have a gun. So it was an honest mistake, and there were huge riots about it. And as the police commander at the time said, no police officer goes out with any intention to kill anyone. Firearms officers are deployed thousands of times a year in the UK. In the vast majority of cases, no shots are fired. I don't see why we shouldn't have our police armed routinely, but that's another story. Police time is wasted, it's squandered chasing up controversial Facebook posts, claims of expressions of racial hatred and so on. Now, racial hatred is rebarbative, but the police got bigger fish to fry, real crimes that would do actual physical harm rather than just a case of hurt feelings. I don't want people to suffer racial abuse, but let's view it as a civil wrong. The criminal law is not the right instrument to deal with this, and it just uses up a huge amount of police time. Which would you be more concerned about, being mugged or someone saying something rude about your race? Anyway, so I think policing's been over-intellectualized as well, turned into an academic subject. Forget it's a practical thing, it's a hands-on thing. The police has been imbued with a certain liberal left ideology. You might subscribe to that, but the police are there to serve everyone. Left-wing, right-wing, centrist, apolitical, far-right, left-right. They're citizens too, right? They have right to do. Now the police mustn't be too concerned about keeping everybody happy. They can't. It's an impossible task, and they have to police noisy and rowdy demonstrations, which then turn into riots. Do so with as much sensitivity as they can, and it's a tough call. Are they using excessive force? Are they using a lack of sufficient force? Either way, they're damned or they're damned. So now it seems that the police are the shock troops of the loony left, and they're all into supporting people who are being transgendered and so on, and they have to be actively pro-gay. Now, the gay police officers doesn't bother me one whit. Policemen are openly gay, go to gay bars and so on. But in police magazines like Police Review, they're constantly harping on about this sort of thing. Why don't they actually talk about policing, about detecting crime, about discouraging people from committing criminal offences in the first place? That should be the gravamen of police work, not advancing an ideology. The old days, it seems that police were mostly working class Tories, but now they're bourgeois socialists. Now, policing should be open to people of almost all points of view. Notably, members of the BNP have been banned from joining the police for several years. I hold no brief for the BNP, but we've crossed a dangerous line when people are not allowed to join the police because of their political ideology. Why not ban Labour members from joining it? Or Lib Dems? Or Conservatives? Do you see where this leads? So it's too media-led policing in the United Kingdom. Operation U-Treat, chasing up instances. Did a man pinch a woman's bottom 50 years ago? I'm serious, like Jim Davidson. Now, obviously there's sexual abuse of children, that's different, but even if somebody committed a minor sexual assault against an adult decades ago, it's quite unpleasant, but it can't be proven one way or the other. And it's very unpopular to say it, but it's trifling. We're not talking about rape, that's different. And terrorism. We face an infinitesimally small chance of being killed by a terrorist attack. Of course, the police need to pay some attention to that, but we shouldn't emphasise that so much that lots of officers are drawn away from ordinary police duties. So the police have become largely a reactive, not a proactive force, not there as beat bobbies out patrolling, getting to know their area, noticing something's wrong, dealing with things informally as they could do, because of course the blizzards of regulation have made it impossible for them to do so. Largely it's not their fault. I suppose some police officers have been so indoctrinated that they believe a lot of the new liberal left nonsense. Now, liberals and left-wingers, they do have a contribution to make on policing, and in some respects they've improved it over the past 50 years or so, but they've also made it worse in other regards.